Okay, we'll start.
Cool.
Hello, welcome to yet another edition of Anime Review, our live weekly anime podcast that we run here. And I'm Zach Reese, I'm your host, and I'm joined as always by Deanna
Hello.
and Nusha.
Hello.
Hello. And so, yes, we're here today to talk about the fine art of anime. And
Are
so,
you okay?
yeah, sorry, I'm fighting back the emotion in my voice. So yeah, it's been a heck of a week once again for anime. All of us actually, Friday night we all hung out and saw Maquia in theaters because that's premiering this weekend. And I think I mentioned it before when we did our anime expo review, uh, uh, post show, whatever you want to call it, that I got to see like the first half of that, and then I missed out because I had to go to a different panel. But now we got a chance to see the whole movie, and I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts since we saw it a couple days ago. This is a Sunday, July 22nd, after all, and so Deanna, is it still sticking with you like it does for me?
My heart is still heavy.
Oh my gosh.
I've been listening to the soundtrack nonstop.
That the credits song was one where it's like no one. I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to move. I just want to kind of soak it in after everything that had happened. And so, I don't know if I listen to that soundtrack. I think I might crack. So I don't know if I should.
Yeah, no one like moved when the credits rolled.
No, no, I didn't. And that's the thing. Like, there's these very special moments that obviously the music really ties into. That brings back those memories of exactly what happened during those key frames. Like the two moments that really stick out with me is the one with Medmel. What happened? What she has to go through. It's really like the last like arc of that entire movie. It just really drives home exactly everything that happened till that point, and you know the themes that were presented early on in that as the themes of like loss amongst the different people that Makia met in her journey to just everything up to that led up to that last little bit, when she went to that house. And so it's just I don't want to spoil it, of course, because I'm sure a lot of people haven't watched it yet. But man, this you were talking about before how the director of Your Name was kind of jealous that this director was able to really nail home some of those topics. And you and I were talking after the movie, and yeah, it seemed like that whole sense of longing that these characters feel when they're separated from each other and when they come back, it's delivered in such a strong way that there's a huge amount of emotional impact. The time when that does happen in Your Name as well, but I think to that not to this degree. Probably because the character is a lot more relatable because it's not just two people that kind of got to know each other very well through their weird time traveling stuff. It's in this case it's more like what is a mother and a son.
Yeah, I heard the movie was inspired by the director's own personal relationship with her mom. It was apparently very rough, so I guess she was able to put those personal feelings into the movie.
Yeah, you can really tell that happened. How did you feel, Nusha?
Yeah, it was a really beautiful movie. Everything from like the visuals to the amazing soundtrack. I feel like it's an indicator of a good movie when the credits roll and everyone just kind of stays planted in their seats just to like digest what just happened. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. I didn't bawl like a lot of people did in the theater, but that didn't stop me from enjoying the movie. Uh, just a really great story about motherhood and loss.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, basically, I think that the movie still has a few more showings before it stops its run. And so, anyone out there listening to this before the run is up, I think there's another one maybe this Wednesday, and maybe another day or two after that. So, I highly recommend it if you want to, watch a movie that really packs an emotional punch. Definitely go check that out. But with that in mind, let's actually get into the actual anime that premiered this week that we can talk about here. So now that we transition over here, so yeah, it's actually personally I watched less anime this week than I did last week. It's because Gigigi no Kitaro actually premiered last night, which is unusual. Usually it's a couple days beforehand. At least from maybe I'm totally misremembering. So I did not get a chance to see that. So and I also dropped another show, Harakana Receive, the beach volleyball show. I decided to just drop it. It wasn't capturing my interest at all. So figured I'd have more time to be watching other things anyway. So let's
You
get
didn't
into
like Sexy Haikyuu?
no, no, like I'm not opposed to plot in some respects. It's just that overall it just wasn't capturing my interest in terms of just the characters and things like that. So if it was lifted up by those other things, I would not have a problem whatsoever with it. But in this case, I don't think I can really stick with it. So I figured why put myself through that, and let's just drop it, especially because now it's part of a podcast. It's be a little bit better. I might go back and watch it on my own time, but as far as discussions for the podcast, I don't think I'll continue talking about it anyway. But let's talk about the show that we all got to see, that we're all watching right now, right at the top here, Hanebado. Now, we're not talking about the most recent episode they premiered this morning, just like an hour ago, because clearly that's a little too recent. Let's talk about last week's episode, the one that I kind of hinted at before when we were just discussing the second episode. So last week was episode 3, and so Nusha, how'd you feel about this episode? About basically, it feels like they're getting more into the characters themselves. Thankfully, well, I guess they always have, but in this case, it's getting into like the dynamics between the group themselves.
Yeah, I think despite being a show about badminton, I don't think that's going to be the main focus. Like with a lot of sports anime, it's the characters and like their story with the sport that they're playing that's like the center of focus. Um,
It's
and so yeah,
yeah.
what?
I was gonna say it's like it's once again that it's speaking of which, we're talking about Maquia. It's like it's about the relationship between uh her mother and what she's going through.
Yeah, exactly. But like that doesn't stop them from animating the games in like such amazing detail, and that's like what kind of keeps you interested as well. Yeah, this episode did a really, really good job of setting up what's her name? Ayano?
Yeah.
Yeah, but like not through her eyes. Like you got to see her development and her story with badminton through her friends' eyes, which I thought was really interesting. Uh, and we also got to see like how she's experiencing burnout from playing this sport so much and expecting certain results, like meeting her mother again and everything like that. And how at the very end it had a really nice message of even though you're doing this to get better and even though you're doing it for a certain result, you're still supposed to be having fun doing what you're doing. That's why you love this sport. And so the ending had a really nice message of just they're playing badminton, but it was a very carefree moment of badminton where they were just laughing and having fun, reminding her why she picked up the sport in the first place.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, and I actually have a relevant image to show. But yeah, it's a lot of it. Also, is the relationship between Ayano and her friend Elena. That
Mhm.
they've known each other since they were little kids, and Elena, I could tell that Ayano had like this really strong love for the sport, and it went beyond trying to get into her mother's good graces, because as a kid, don't imagine that's really at the forefront of your mind. It's more, I mean, sure, there's like that thing about playing with your mom or your father, and growing your relationship that way. But it also is, it all has to also do with just your own appreciation and your own enjoyment, the fun times you had with the activity itself. And there were some great shots of this. Apparently this was shot by a different studio, like they outsourced this episode, and
Huh.
so it was done through the direction, of course, same director, but it was animated and everything by a different studio, and yet that's why like it doesn't really, the first two episodes were very action heavy with the terms of animation, things like that. Clearly you could tell that this episode dialed back a lot, and it went more towards the characters that we're talking about here. The director did come back and say episode 4, which is what premiered this morning, gets back into that stuff here, but this is a great way for them to maybe save a little bit on their budget, which is a good thing, while
Hmm.
also delivering, yes, once again, the relationships between the different characters, and just get deeper into that stuff instead of worrying about the problems of like making a show too action heavy and not too emotionally driven. How about your feelings on this, Deanna?
Yeah, I'm glad we're taking a break from all the intense emotions from the first few episodes, and we're learning more about each character. But that scene in the park, that was my favorite moment because yeah, like Nusha said, it's about having fun. It reminds me of like sometimes you just gotta remember why you're doing what you're doing. Um, and yeah, we didn't mention Twin Tails though. Like, are we gonna talk about her?
Yeah,
Yes.
I actually really like what they did with her because like they, even though it was focused on like the emotion and everything, they did the sports anime trope of setting up like a roadblock. Like now we know that Ayana's not like this invincible player that can't be beaten. She has her own roadblocks to go through, and so I'm kind of excited to see how that rematch goes.
Yeah, and of course Nagisa now looks to be more of a captain than ever. Clearly before she was full of herself in many
Yeah,
respects, but this is definitely her. Like now she's trying to get on uh, all the members' good sides and showing that she is indeed like a leader. And I think that's also great to see that on her as well. So yeah, it's been a great show. Still continues to be very strong, and so I'm excited to see more about that. So let's get into the next conversation here. Deanna, let's talk about Gintama. What you think about this episode?
Oh man, I feel like me talking about Gintama, especially when neither of you have watched it, it's just gonna make you guys like question why I'm watching this show.
I always do
Um,
anyway.
but yeah, this episode it focused on my favorite characters. Those two right there, they are siblings and they're
Yes.
part of this clan that's very powerful and um, yeah, they're fighting this bad guy, and then in the midst of like teaming up against that guy, Kagura accidentally kicks her brother in the face, and then that just like sets off this whole like sibling fight while they're trying to fight the bad guy, and then eventually like the bad guy's like dick comes out, and then
Oh
it's
my
just like
god.
yeah, and then it's just this like it's like dick and balls humor. It's just like classic Gintama. So yeah.
it's not what I expected looking at that
No.
thumbnail. I
Yeah,
thought it was
so
like this big epic like grand fight and
no.
No, not
dicks are
Gintama.
flopping out.
Yeah, so just when you expect like it being a serious fight, like they Gintama of course has to turn it into a parody or some sort of just ridiculous humor.
That's great. One day I'll start this show, I swear. But right now it just seems so daunting.
See, you seem like way more capable of doing that because the longest show I've ever watched is Naruto, and I dropped that. You've seen a lot, if not all, of One Piece, and so Gintama seems like it'd be right up your alley.
Yeah,
You have
just
the
I have to sit
endurance.
down one weekend and like
One
lock
weekend to
myself
see all
away.
of
That's all
Gintama.
it takes.
Just
That's
well,
all it takes.
maybe if you watch like straight nonstop. Not even
Just
that. I
go
don't
into
think you
my
can manage.
room, go into my room with a 2 liter of Mountain Dew, and come out a changed man
I don't want to hear about your stories about what happens behind closed doors in your bedroom
with Mountain Dew.
with Mountain Dew. Yeah, it's definitely one of those shows that I've been checking out here and there. I actually started watching it around the time it came out for the first time. That and One Piece, in fact. But after like 10 episodes, I'm like, all right, this is. I already felt like it was getting a little long, but that doesn't matter. I should probably give it a chance as well. But that's great to hear that it continues to be a good show. Moving on, then let's talk about a show that you two are watching and I'm not. Banana Fish. Nusha, I'll let you start this conversation. I've seen some pictures from this episode, and it looks like they're getting into the relationships, I guess, again.
Yeah, yeah, they definitely dialed up the shoujo meter here, but
Oh,
yeah, it's picking up. It's getting really interesting, and the whole mystery behind this series is what is banana fish. Like I thought for a while it was the name of the drug, but they're saying now that it could be the name of a person or an organization. And so yeah, it seems like that mystery is going to be what drives the series. The photographer on the left, I think his name is A, or his nickname's A.
yeah. For people who are not watching, of course, it's the short, black-haired boy.
The Japanese like photographer. Yeah.
Yeah.
AG.
AG, that was
Yeah.
his name. He had a really standout moment because I thought for a while he was just going to be like the the Watson character, you know, like just kind of in the background, marveling at what's happening, and just like a focal point for the audience to relate to.
Oh,
But
like me?
he actually, pretty much, yeah. Um, but he had like a standout moment, like where he, in order to escape from this scenario, he pole vaults over this brick wall, and he even gains the trust of Ash, who at this point had been very like disconnected. And I thought that was really cool because we, at the same time as Ash, develop this respect for the character, and so it becomes much more believable when in the third episode, I think, Ash starts opening up and involving him in his plans. So I thought that was a really neat way to make it understandable and relatable in that sense.
Danny, you feel the same way?
Yeah, it's interesting to see how the relationship between AG and Ash start to develop, especially when that that scene, Nusha, I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about, that
Yeah, yeah.
Ash transmits a message to AG through mouth to mouth.
Yep, I saw that
um,
picture. I was like, oh, okay.
so yeah, I just want to emphasize that you know this is not a yaoi anime. I know some people do like have that misconception because it's like two male characters and whatever. But yeah, it's there are a lot of dark themes still. Like in this episode, it was gang rape. So I mean, I appreciate the show for not revealing too much, and they gave just a bit of context that you could like pick up on what happened. Um, but yeah, and then unlike some other anime that's very like character driven, the show's very plot driven. But that's not to say that we don't get characters with agency and real personalities. Like Ash, for example, I was surprised to find out that he is quite resourceful and intelligent because he reads like the newspaper columns and stuff. So he's also like in the know about like what's going on, and he's not just violent and brutal. Uh, um, but yeah, it's just there are no stops to this like this show. It just like keeps hitting you,
Mm-hmm.
and like I'm scared to see what's gonna happen next.
It looks like it gets really serious, and so I did say I was going to catch up with you guys and watch the show. But so by next episode, I'll hopefully be able to like talk with you guys about that because it definitely seems pretty fascinating from a dramatic standpoint. So I want to check it out for myself.
It definitely is. That's like the first show. Like, I was gonna ask you guys, what's like the first show that you started when you like started binging this weekend?
Um,
Because mine was definitely Banana Fish.
I think it was Cells at Work was the first one I started
Really?
watching. But yeah, I mean that's just because I do this thing on Crunchyroll when they have a page that's just most recently updated, and so I just go back and just open up new tabs so I can watch it all. But it's not for any particular reason I opened that up first. I mean the first one that I was really interested in checking out was probably My Hero Academia, but that's just me. So
Yeah. Always a strong choice.
yeah.
Yeah, Banana Fish is the one anime I'm probably looking forward to most this season.
Oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
good. That's good. Well, and then let me talk about a show that I've been checking out. That it's because you guys, of course, are watching a show that I'm not seeing. Let me talk about a show that I'm seeing that you guys aren't, and that's Chio School Road. Now, this is actually this episode is kind of a holdover from last week, and so I think we talked about it. I don't remember if it was on the podcast, but yes, it was about Chio, the girl, getting caught up in a bit of a mess with this mafia gang leader. Not a mafia gang leader; he's actually just a gang leader. I think he's called like the Star Road Gang or something like that. It's kind of a cute name they have for each other, but they're like these really tough looking guys that look like they're in the Yakuza. But she gets caught up in this issue where she tries to get to school, tries to get around this guy's motorcycle, accidentally hits it, knocks it over, gets in big trouble. So she puts up on this front that she's this a very powerful, legendary mob character called Bloody Butterfly. Which is actually her online handle that she uses to play video games, and so she kind of, fakes fakes this guy out to think that she's this big deal, but she's not. And so it leads to this whole thing where she's taken to school on his bike, and he just continues to live in constant fear of this girl that's nowhere near the way. But the main guy kind of reminds me of what's his name, Mita from oh gosh, I'm already blanking on the anime that was last season about the girl that gets transported through time. Uh, Help me out here, guys.
Steins Gate?
No, no, that was not last season. No, it's the girl that she's got psychic powers.
Oh, Hina Matsuri.
Yeah, Hinamatsuri. Who's the dad's name or the
Nita.
Nita. I said Mita. You guys are so confused. That
Just
was a
does
letter
Hina
off.
get transported through time?
I know.
She does. She does.
No, she's from another like world. She's not
Okay.
transported through time.
All right, fine. Corrections here. I made a lot of mistakes. Okay.
You called me out last episode. I'm calling you out this episode.
Okay,
I'm
fine.
sorry.
No, it's fine. Apparently, I also messed up and said Sirius the Jaeger was from Bones when it's actually PA work, so I do apologize for that mistake as well. But no, so yeah, it reminds me of Nita because he's kind of a bizarre kind of dude. So what happens is that in the first half of the episode, because they break it up like you would seem like for a forward coma or something like that, where this guy's like, you know what, I'm gonna quit the game lifestyle. I'm gonna keep my promise that I made to this girl who told him to leave that stuff behind because it's no good. And so she's very embarrassed by her handle, and so they keep repeating it over and over, Bloody butterfly, and so she's like rolling around on the ground just like losing her mind because she's so damn embarrassed. And so what she does is she approaches him, drags him back to Heidi, and she basically explains, no, I'm just this below average girl that there's nothing you should be afraid of. I'm just a loser. I just wanted to not get in trouble with you because I messed up your bike. And so he plays along with her and convinces everybody to be living in a constant fear of this girl so they leave her alone. And so he's like this really good guy. It blew my mind how hilarious it got with these amazing facial expressions that it's like a mix of like JoJo but also just like these just over the top expressions that really killed it for me. And then the second half of the episode, they bring in this like the first time I've ever seen the sport of comedy introduced. It's like they put their hands out almost like a T pose in a way, and they dance side to side, and they have to run up and catch somebody. It's like this Indian sport, and it just goes, it cranks everything, like the humor and the comedy and like the weird issues going on with that show to the 11th. And I really appreciated this show because of that. It's so damn funny, and I had such a great time watching it. So far, that's been like my number one comedy show of the season. And once again, a lot of it has to do with the fact that the girl Chio is voiced by Satania from Gabriel Dropout, and I just love her voice actress. So I'm looking forward to checking out more of that. Actually, I do have a picture here. Now that's the high school girl. I'd actually do.
Whoa, jumping ahead there.
Yes.
Jesus, Zach.
Yes. It's a good shot though. No, I actually don't have.
It is, yeah.
I don't have a picture for Chio School Road, but yeah, it's been pretty great so far. So I'm looking forward to checking out more of that. So, let's talk about Holmes of Kyoto.
So I mentioned this before, but I'm probably gonna drop this show.
Yeah, right. It's not really doing it for you.
I wasn't a fan of the second episode because it focused on drama that felt unnecessary.
Forced.
And not not really on the Japanese like antiques or whatever. So it was like a drama about girls hating each other out of jealousy, and like I'm not a fan of those kinds of stories. And then also with Holmes being like this really smart guy, and he's like outlining his thought process, but it's like I still couldn't follow his logic. So people are comparing the show to Hyoka, but I don't really see that comparison.
See, Hyoka, like I had trouble with that watching through that show as well, because of some of the topics. Like it seemed like they were kind of repeating themes over and over again. It really picked up towards the end of that, but it sounds like this show, who knows, maybe it'll have like a redeeming arc later on, but I think that it sounds like it's not capturing you early on, then why bother?
Yeah, I'm gonna give it the 3-episode rule, so hopefully it goes back to what it's meant to be about.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You love antiques, I get it. So yeah, just all antiques all the time. So yeah, all the best to that. So before we get into the next one for Nushaw's list, let's talk about Planet With, because you talked up this show last week, and it makes me more and more interested in seeing it. And now we've got this picture that you sent to me. It's a floating pig of some sorts with feet for hands and hands for feet. So what's going on?
Yeah. Okay, so in the last episode, I explained that like there was an unidentified flying object that started hovering over
Is
the
this
town that the
is
story takes
it?
place in. The last one was a cat,
That's right.
and then this one was a pig, and they actually went into what these things are. So we find out that in this episode, the maid and that cat that the main character is living with are actually from the same planet that these UFOs are from, but they are from a different faction. So the people on Earth who can now create these mechs that they're using to fight, uh, the UFOs are from what they call a sealing faction that plans on keeping mankind sealed on Earth so they can't continue to expand even further. And then the maid and the cat are from a pacifist faction that wants to keep their involvement to the minimum. They just want to confiscate those mechs, but then leave mankind to kind of have their own agency and will. And so we're the pacing was definitely a lot better in this episode because in the first one there was just so much to introduce, so much to get out of the way, that this episode was a nice little refreshing change of pace for it. And then after they explain that story, the episode kind of falls back into what the first episode did, which was uh, one of the guys in the mech take down this UFO, and then at the end, the main character ambushes them, beats them, and then takes the little source of their power that allows them to turn into a mech.
So he has the power of the man bear pig thing that's going on here, the man pig.
No, that's like what those 7 heroes are fighting. You know what I mean?
Oh
Yeah,
my.
it's strange, but they explain it better in the series. I can't explain, but like aside from like the plot explanation, like the series is actually beginning to really surprise me with how funny it's actually getting. Like there are some cuts and like comedic timing bits where just like I was surprised with how funny the series was getting. And aside from that, like the the heroes that are going off to fight these UFOs are all getting very crucial moments of development. Like we're seeing traumatic moments in their past and then what caused them to go out and fight these creatures. And so we're getting like a lot of development for not just the main characters, but for the side characters as well. And if there's one thing I had to fault it on, I feel like the main character's just kind of like going along for the ride right now. Like we were teased at the end of the first episode that like there's a reason that he got infuriated when he took the source of the first guy's mech, but like we didn't really get an explanation for that. Like we as an audience are just kind of left in the dark for that right now. And so right now the main character just kind of seems like he's being dragged along, and these 7 heroes that are going off to fight the UFOs are like the more interesting cast right now. But yeah, I'm really interested. Like it's still got me gripped right now. I still want to find out what happens. I want to learn more about the mystery. So I'm definitely going to continue it.
Yeah, it seems more and more fascinating the more you talk about it, and so it's just another one of those shows that I feel like I should be watching as well. So,
Hmm.
yeah, and it's the pig though. It's so bizarre. Like so far, it's definitely something different, and I think that that might be something nice to have during the summer. So,
Yeah, it's definitely like a great mix of action and then just like weirdness,
God,
Kind
God.
of like Fooly Cooly.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Like it's just that off the wall kind of humor. Like Chio School
Yeah,
Road goes like bizarre in a very comedic way. This one just looks like it's bizarre, but it's more like just the spectacle of it all. That's kind of
yeah.
fascinating. So
It's still kind of grounded.
yeah. More than Chio. So let's talk about cells at work. And so this episode, uh, which is once again a great episode, we learned about influenza and the effect it has on a person's body. And so the whole episode's about all these different cells getting infected with the virus that continues to spread, and then explains about how that happens to them. We also got to learn more about the T cells, which this guy who began as naive T cell. So he's just like this wimp of a guy who's very scared to fight anybody. You just see him walking around with like a flashlight and a knife, told to go ahead and kill one of them, but he can't even bring himself to do that much. And so everyone's looking like zombie cells. And I think that my favorite part of this episode was the macrophage. It's the girl people don't know. It's the woman that's it looks like a bit of like a maid, and she's carrying like this gigantic hatchet. That's voiced by Kikuko Inoue, who has been around since the 80s. She's like the voice of people known as like Kasumi from Ranma Half, like Chianti from Detective Conan. People might know her more as like Lust from Full Metal Alchemist, and so she's been around for a long time. So just hearing her voice, like, oh no no no, just it's pretty. It really sold the experience for me, but I love that episode because yes, it also went to the JoJo route. They introduced he went from the naive T cell to just that he grew to become a regular T cell and also proliferated, and so he's just like this gigantic dude packed with muscle. And so I thought this was like kind of an adorable episode because you also got to learn about the T cell group, their history of how they were also a bunch of wimps before they were whipped into shape, and so I loved it as much. Deanna, what'd you think about it?
I think my favorite scene was when the naive T cell was transforming, and then like there's like this bright light, and then in my head I was like Mabushi.
Yes.
So, and yeah, I love that we finally got introduced to Macrophage. She is a force to be reckoned with,
Oh my gosh.
and it's also interesting to see how each cell like division, how they communicate with each other and kind of like you know carry out their duties and whatnot. But I was almost sad that the platelets weren't going to be in the episode until the very end.
Oh yeah, they need to be
And
like the
then,
last episode. They were all over the place. Now they're just kind of back to being side characters, at least for now.
hmm and then also when the white T cells, when they migrate to a certain location, they just kind of like pop out and like float in between these narrow spaces. So that was pretty funny.
I loved it. It was like you could really tell the attention to detail in this show because the guy loses his boot when he's trying to get
Oh
out,
yeah.
and then one of the other guys show up. It's like, can you pull me through this? Just because they're all like stuck inside this, what's like a little narrow alleyway. They have to be pulled out. I just love that stuff. It's like these little details that really sell everything for me. Uh, Yeah, so it's been a really good show so far, and Nusha, you said you were thinking of dropping it, but that was just on the first episode, right?
Yeah, like it's a great show, don't get me wrong, but just like I'm watching so much that if I had to pick something, it would be this one to drop, and not because of any kind of like fault on its end. It's just like the nature of the show is like a monster of the week, like comedic series. But
It's true.
so far I'm really enjoying it. Like the way they're personifying these different cells and functions in the body is really interesting. The whole bit with the naive T cell was super funny. I feel like the over the top hairstyle he gets with like the one long tuft of hair coming out from
It's
under
just
his hat.
it's so
It's super funny. Yeah, like it goes places, and I'm having fun with it. And like the thing you mentioned with the white blood cells, like their comedic bits with them like squeezing through these walls is super funny. But yeah, I'm having a good time with it so far. I mean, if I pick
yeah.
up more shows, then I feel like this will be the one I drop. But again, not for any fault on its end.
Like I was trying to see if I could hear what like who the voice actor was for the naive T cell when he becomes a T cell when he activates. Um, it sounded a bit like Kazuma Kiryu from Yakuza, so I was trying to hear the voice. I couldn't find. I was trying to do some searching around before the podcast, and I could not figure it out. But he sounds a lot like him, like Kazuma. So I would not be surprised though, because he just sounds like a JoJo character, which is great. I just love the fact that he's like that. I imagine we'll see more of him in the future. But then again, I guess like when he got the end of the previous episode, he got beaten back to being a naive T cell. So I don't know what the situation is regarding that. So
Yeah, I don't know how the power ups work in this show. Like, can you just revert back to being a scrawny kid, or?
I guess because why didn't that happen to everybody else? Why was he the one that got beaten down?
Yeah, like it seemed like everyone else was like training to get to where they got, and then the naive T cell just kind of got like an all might power up bestowed upon him.
That's a good relation. I'm okay with that. If that's the case. So then let's get into the next show that we can talk about here that I can actually speak of, Angels of Death. Now, I think I did talk about this last week. That yeah, I finally got catching up with this, and so in this episode, let me just pull up the image that we can look at. Yes, so in this episode, this is a character that we kind of heard about in the previous episode, but this is the image we're looking at is a shot of Edward Mason, or Eddie, who is a boy who likes to make graves for his victims. So throughout this episode, they're getting into this whole thing where he's apparently got a bit of a fondness, like he's interested romantically with the main girl, Rachel Gardner. And so he's trying to do all these different ways to woo her and saying, I'm going to build you the best grave you've ever seen, which is quite the promise. It's just to see what happens. Some of the things I noticed though when I was watching this episode is that they never really explained why he's wearing this mask, and so it's certainly a boy. You know, he's just wearing this gigantic like pumpkin head, and so I actually did some digging around because since it wasn't really explained at all in the entire episode, and it looks like it's also not explained in the game what's going on there, and so when I checked it out, apparently in the manga, the whole story, his whole backstory is that he was born into a family of graveyard workers, and he worked really hard and he spent long hours, but he was never really appreciated for that. Anybody, because he's got older brothers and they basically got everything while he was left with nothing, and he got like the leftovers and hand-me-downs, all that kind of stuff. And so because he was usually the one who took care of any of the dirty work, like burying, I can't even say the word burying, the family pets. He would basically like take possession of whatever he buried, because apparently his older brother had what seemed to be like bipolar syndrome and bipolar disorder, and so like he would lash out and sometimes kill the family pets. So he was the one that was responsible for burying them, and so since he got into his head that he basically took possession of whatever he buried, he actually built up this urge to start to kill like random animals, and so it turns out this mask he's wearing is used to hide his identity, because as he was burying these animals, he met this girl that saw him burying one of them, and so it's not really a spoiler though, that's the case, because it's never explained in the game, like I said, and it looks like it might not ever be explained in the anime either. And that's really been the anime so far. It's that these characters are all kind of fascinating, but they don't really go into their backgrounds unless they, come maybe something will come later with like a big reveal, like maybe the man in charge, which there is one. Will explain all their histories. So I think that at this point it might be that you need to have played the game to get far more insight in that. But I also appreciate that this show, if I can sum it up in one way, it's basically a harem where everyone is trying to kill the same person. That's what it seems like. Everyone wants to kill this girl, so it's like a harem, but it's for the absolute opposite reasons you'd expect.
Kink shaming.
Yes, that's. I mean, if they want to do it, I'm not gonna shame them for it. But yeah, it's like every floor is a different serial killer, and they all just want to kill her for one reason or another. What's been your opinion of this last episode, though, Nusha? I really like this character, Eddie, and it seems like they did him in. They did him in pretty strong.
I don't know. To be honest, like, wasn't really happy with this episode. It's interesting that you mentioned they're cutting a lot of stuff from the manga or the game as well, because I feel like there's just so much. There's developments happening, but there's nothing really being set up to justify them. Like, why does Ray want Zack to be the one to kill her? Like, we didn't get any kind of explanation.
Oh,
She's
they
just
did.
Like,
he said he promised God, and she's a hugely religious person. So because he made a promise to God that he would kill her, she took that as like basically the top, or like that's like the ultimate promise. But
she was invested in him killing her before that even happened.
Yep.
Like, she was still grappling with it, and that's what I didn't really get, is like, this character comes along willing to give you like a beautiful death, one that's painless and stress-free, and you're turning it down because this random character is saying that it said that he'd kill you first. And I feel a lot of people are saying the game is skipping over a lot of crucial moments of
the anime is skipping over the game. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, the moments of relationship building between Zack and Ray, which I totally believe, because I just don't really believe why she would want him to be the one to do it. And also, just like, I was expecting more from the floors,
Yeah.
Like, I was expecting more personality of each serial killer on the floor to be infused into the floor, and like the puzzles they have to solve to get out of there. But like, this kid who has like a pretty interesting story based on what you just said about him being like the gravedigger and this warped belief of what it means when he buries someone and what he's entitled to once he does it. But like, the whole interaction on the floor boiled down to a really poorly animated fight in the dark, and then Rachel just pushing him into a grave. And it didn't really. I was expecting more fulfilling, like, personalized puzzles and like floor designs and stuff like that, and it just didn't really come across in this episode. And then also, I'm sick and tired of hearing Rachel say, I want to die, I want to die, I want to die. Like, I get it. That's like her character motivation. But if a character has to constantly repeat her motivation, I just think it's a poorly written character.
It's getting kind of weird, that's for sure. I mean, it seems like she was still grappling with the whole concept of who was going to be the one to kill her, because even she was getting wooed by Eddie, saying that he was going to be the one to do it. It wasn't until, this is the way that the show pitched it, and that it wasn't until Zach, or Isaac, apparently Zach is short, Isaac is short for Zach, other way around, Zach is short for Isaac, but that she wasn't going to, she was willing to let anybody kill her. But also, obviously, Zach's got a huge investment because he needs to get out of the damn building, and so he's has to like make sure that she stays alive, specifically for him. And so, because he made the promise to God, and once again, that was her whole character at the beginning, is that she's super religious. That it's something that, you know, she took that as like a blood oath of sorts, which is kind of odd.
I'm interested to see where that whole fascination with God goes, because it looks like, based on the opening and stuff, one of the serial killers looks to be a priest.
Yes.
And so I'm interested to see what her character does in that scenario. But if they're going to keep skipping over like crucial moments like this, then I don't know.
I think the biggest problem it's going to face that I can see, because obviously if you played the game, you would have spent hours upon hours and hours getting to know these characters, depending on how long it takes you to get through a route. But you're talking about a show that has to be, you know, condensing everything, where this character has, you know, you first get to, you get to see them, you get like the first introduction to that character, and then they get killed at some point. The serial killer gets killed, and so that's the span of their entire development, is that, because you obviously can't go beyond that. So it's like, this is what happened, unless they do like the Metal Gear Solid thing of like, while I'm dying here, let me explain my entire backstory, because they don't obviously have time for that. And this show only has to take what is. That's why it's like, anytime you see an adaptation of a visual novel into an anime, it's so freaking challenging, because you're trying to get everything packed in this little bit without making a huge mess. I heard that Island is getting better, and so I might go back to watching that show based on what, because I've been seeing people say like it's getting a lot better after the first episode. That was a big mess, so I might go back and watch that. But as for what it's worth, I think I'm probably having a much better experience with it than you are. But mostly because I'm trying to look forward to, like, I'm trying to look forward to seeing like where they could take this and how they can develop these characters. I know you're not dropping the show, of course. It sounds like you're willing to stick with it, like I am. But I totally see where you're coming from, and I'm also agreeing with you that if the best development that Rachel's going to get is that she just wants to die. I think that it's going to be super annoying, and really Zach is the person that's kind of holding things together at this point. If he wasn't there, I think I'd get sick of a lot quicker.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. He's like the glue that's bringing everything together right now. If it wasn't for him, then
so good.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's got a lot of depth to his character. Like, you could potentially see a lot more to his character, and it's every episode they're really hinting into that. It's every time they spend some time on the elevator going up, they have that moment with each other that, you know, kind of sells him even more. So I will say the moment at the end where he gives her the nickname was kind of sweet. Like that, I want more moments like that where we see them developing like their relationship with each other. So I thought that was nice. If they do more of that, then I'm all game for it. Yeah, I think Eddie is kind of like this tragic character, but he's also a killer, so it's kind of hard to, you know, be sad about it. Because he did these awful things. It's just like, you know, like Future Diary or something like that. It's like, okay, I'm supposed to feel something about these characters, but they're also pretty insane and they killed a lot of people, so it's kind of hard to, you know, feel happy about this. It's kind of tough, but hopefully we'll get something more out of their characters soon. Let's get into the next big thing. Deanna, since me and Nusha have been talking a lot here, let's talk about Free, Dive to the Future.
Yeah, so on a lighter note,
they kill people in this episode.
This week's episode, it was very character driven. Haru reunites with his middle school childhood friend or whatever, and it goes into flashbacks of when they both made a promise to swim in a relay race together, but then that promise never got fulfilled because I think Ikuya, the guy right there, he moved away, and so yeah. We also got introductions to some assholes this season,
Oh, great.
and
Awesome.
I was like, don't hurt these good boys. So yeah, I'm just
Bunch of bullies.
like, let's settle this with a swimming race right now. But yeah, there's two stories taking place. There's one in Tokyo with Haru and most of the cast, and then another in Sydney, Australia, with a character who, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but oh my god, what was his name? Rin.
Yes, Ren, the
He's
boy.
in Sydney.
The rival
Yeah,
character. Yes, the
yeah, the
rival
rival.
character. Yeah.
Yeah, he's in Sydney, training and whatnot. So I'm curious to see how those two stories will merge later on. I'm assuming they're both gonna meet in like the nationals or whatever. So yeah.
It still looks like I've been watching. People have been posting gifs on Twitter and things like that from the episodes, and it just still looks absolutely gorgeous. Like the water effects are insanely good.
There are a lot of like zoomed out scenes where you can kind of see like there's one scene of them like looking up at the night sky, so that was really nice. It's like desktop wallpaper worthy.
Yeah, Kyoto Animation still delivering on the show, and so yeah. I mean, I like I mentioned before to you, Twitch a while back, Crunchyroll had this big anime stream, a marathon, like Twitch sometimes does. Like they had that Doctor Who one recently. They had it for free, and I watched a lot of free. And so I'm like, I'm close enough where maybe I can just catch up on the rest of it and see
Oh,
how this show
you actually
goes.
watched it?
I did because I had
Oh,
nothing
I
else
didn't
to
know
watch.
that.
So I had it on in the background, and I I stuck with it. So yeah, no, I mean, I started watching free around the time it came out. I watched a few episodes, but I never really stuck with it. But you know, as someone who has been has done triathlons. Like I was big into swimming. Like that was my favorite part of the whole relay. And so I was fascinated by that. And you know, like things like a track star becoming a swimming a swimmer, a swimming swimmer.
Swimming.
That's something that I kind of liked. So I might catch up and watch it with you as well. But there's a lot of shows that we're watching right now. But that's just another one of those. So let's get into an kind of like the last show that I think that actually we got a couple more shows that we can talk about that no one else has seen. But let's talk about High Score Girl. And so yeah, this is for people who don't remember. This is one of my favorite images. This is the one I kind of teased before. So once again, it's about Haro, this boy who's got nothing redeeming about him, but also all he does is play arcade games all day. And this girl, this high class girl Ono, who kind of tails around with him and tries to figure out what's going on, and tries to like beat him at a bunch of different games. And so the big focus on this episode was about the PC Engine, which I really appreciated because I love a lot of PC Engine games, and so I love or the TurboGrafx as it's known in the West. I really like that there was like a big of a retrospective of sorts where they showed off a bunch of different games for the system and showed them playing it. I love so this shot is because Ono. Because Haro is sick, she comes in with the brings like all his handouts and everything, comes to his house and gives it to him. But Haro's mom is something else. She basically like brings her in and is like, "Don't do anything lewd," and then she creeps. She walks out through the door and then just stares through like a crack in the door and just like stares at him. It's very creepy. What's even better is that it's the voice of Satomi Arai, who is the voice of Kuroko from A Certain Magical Index or Beatrice from ReZero. And so she's got this really like a high crackly voice that's just it really sells it because Kuroko of course is like the biggest perv in the entire series. And so it's kind of ironic seeing her still playing that role. I wouldn't say ironic, it's like it makes a lot of sense in fact. But I also appreciated that this episode really drove home how they're like huge fans of video games. And so you can also start to get a sense of how hellish Ono's life is with all the different expectations that are put upon her. Like it's almost summer vacation, and they just have like their big graduation for the class, and she's immediately told by her teacher that, or like her personal teacher at home, that she's going to go through a bunch of different classes and training. So the last thing that she wants to do is go home. She'd rather be playing games to sort of escape from that reality and let off some steam. it also kind of showed that, because Ono only doesn't speak at all, she just has a lot of like expressions and kind of, sounds, makes some sounds here and there. Haro ends up talking a hell of a lot, but it only makes sense because they have to make up for that. But this episode kind of drove home like the dynamic between the two characters and how they kind of need each other, and I thought that that was pretty nice. What do you think, Nusha?
Yeah, I really, really like this new episode. I think when I first finished it, a complaint I had that I don't have anymore was like, is that Ono's mother, by the way, or is that like her tutor, the one who's like setting up this curriculum for her?
Yeah, it's a tutor. I know
Oh,
that
okay.
she's got like a older sister, but I don't think they showed her yet. So this is, yeah, that's
Okay.
a tutor.
Okay, because like one of my complaints that originally was like she's a little too like over the top,
Oh
like
yeah,
with
yes.
the demon fangs and like the no pupil eyes and like, but there's definitely like a running theme, not theme, but like a running gag of these adult characters all being these over the top stereotypes, like
Like
there's the
shop
guy,
owner. Yeah.
the shop owner, the PE teacher that's a little too enthusiastic about wanting to punish children.
And he's like, "Come on, do it!" He's like, "I'm gonna."
Yeah,
What's the move that's they put their fingers together in a gun and just
the 1,000 years of death or whatever.
Yeah.
That's what I know it as. But yeah, like
Naruto. Yes.
at first I thought that was a little much, but I feel like that's an important part of the story is because these are like just kids who want to live their days like playing video games and having fun, and in their eyes that's what these adults probably seem like. It's very similar to like Zach, I don't think you read this, but I know Deanna read some of it. Good Night Poon Poon, where like all the adults are like these crazy over the top like hard to understand characters, and all the kids are like the sane logical ones, and I thought that was really interesting. But
So you think
aside
it's
from that,
it's all perception? Like these are normal people? Like the adults aren't
I
that
think
crazy?
it could be.
I think some of them are
I
pretty.
think
I
it
mean, the mom is clearly, but
The mom was great. Like she was my standout character for
she's
this episode.
so good. She
She's
gives
so
him
good.
a
That scene
German
where
soup.
she's like, when she's going down the door, then her head rotates 180 degrees and then goes up the door again. I thought that was hysterical.
It's so over the
But
top, and yeah, and then she catches them fighting over the controller, and she's just like, "Don't be doing this! Oh my boy!" This German
yeah,
soup
exactly.
puts him in a wrestling.
She's
move.
great.
Oh my god.
But yeah, like you mentioned, like getting into the dynamic between the two characters, like that's the whole selling point of this series, I guess, is like these are just two characters that have pretty tough existences. Like both of them have their issues and they use gaming as like an escape from that, and they just kind of meet each other through that. And I think that's a really nice story, and I'm excited to see how that develops, and I'm excited to see more crazy caricature adults as the series goes on. I'm not so excited for the advertisements in the middle of the episodes, but that's something I'll take with a grain of salt.
Yeah, the Namco Museum or whatever. That was
Yeah.
that's a bit much. But
Yeah,
that's if
it's
it's right,
jarring.
if it's just that particular moment, that's fine. I mean, it's clear that they can't really just say, buy a PC Engine today if you want to spend like $300 on one. I think it's still pretty great to have like all this nostalgia because it's the early '90s, so it's just for me anyway. Obviously, I'm older than you guys, but for me, it's just enough for me to have that nostalgia. I didn't own a PC, TurboGrafx or anything like that, but a lot of those games appeared on other platforms, so I liked seeing that stuff, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else happened in that weird arcade. Whatever happened in that 10 yen arcade, I don't know what that was about. Like, it's getting into like the
Yeah, what
supernatural
was that?
stuff.
Like they got transported to like another time or something like that.
They don't address it, and I'm confused
They
because it's like,
don't.
what happened? Did they just lose all
Also,
their money?
was the man behind the counter dead? I don't.
That's like super creepy guy just staring at him. Oh my god!
I kind of hope they don't explain it. I think it's funnier if they don't explain what just happened there. It's just like a mystery of the town.
Some parallel dimension, but like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's so great. I've been really appreciating the show, and once again, it's great to have a show that's really deep into the video game aspect because that's something that we all love. So, let's get into Tenrou Sirius the Jaeger. Now, I have yet to still catch up with that. So, Deanna, tell us a little bit about the show because you mentioned before that you were concerned about how it was sort of relegating itself to kind of unoriginal content. But is it getting better?
I would say I'm gonna stick to the show for the action, if it keeps up every episode. But other than that, there's this episode focused on like a father and a daughter, and it totally reminded me of Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah.
With Nina and whatever. So it's like, oh my god, is she gonna like, is she gonna be okay? So it kind of had that story for that episode, and yeah, it just, I don't know. It's like I can't find anything that really stands out to me aside from the action. I don't know if you feel the same, Yusha.
I completely agree. Like, as the show's going on, I'm getting less and less. I'm just going to accept that this is an action series, and I'm not going to be invested in the plot at all because
Mm-hmm.
we've seen so much of this already. Like, that episode screamed Full Metal Alchemist when I was watching it.
Yeah.
And I was waiting for her to become like this half zombie, half vampire, half human hybrid that the dad created or whatever like that. But I don't know. It's just the main character is also super boring. He's like the same burned badass we've seen before, where it's like, oh, my clan's been killed, and now I'm dark and foreboding, and I have this special power that no one else has that I can use to take down these creatures that are attacking humanity. And it's like, I've seen this all before, but the fight scenes are amazing. I will say that.
Yeah, and then we get that ending where the person
Oh my
that,
god.
his brother apparently is still alive, but like
I rolled my eyes.
yeah, I was just like, okay.
Yeah, that was the big reveal of the episode, and I was like, oh, come on.
That's all. That was it. That was the thing.
Yeah, the big reveal was like, I don't know. It looks like his brother's a vampire now, and he's not crazy like the other ones. He's got like agency still. What did you think about what's his name, Philip?
Deanna.
Wait, what? Philip? What?
Yeah. What did you
I
think about
haven't seen the
Philip?
show, so he's not talking to me. Yeah.
The dude with the crossbow who like plays the violin or whatever.
Oh, what did I think of him?
Yeah.
I mean, like, he's a kid, right? I don't know if
I don't know. Like they had like
He's-
that moment where it was like the first episode he has like this beef with Yuri or whatever for
Mhm.
whatever reason, and the kid's like, why? And he's like, I guess because his family hurt my family. And she's like, okay, but he didn't do it, right? And he's like, yeah, I guess. And she's like, okay, so why do you hate him? And he just goes, yeah, I guess I don't hate him. And I'm like, is that the development? It was literally in 30 seconds. It was a kid asked him why 4 times, and he had this character developmental moment. And I'm like,
That's all it
was
takes.
stupid. Yeah.
It's poor development when a kid has to tell you like you're acting like a dumb piece of shit.
Yeah, you don't understand. What's your motivation here, huh?
Yeah, it's stupid. I don't know, but action's great, music's great. I'll stick with it.
Yeah, see, I'm not invested in these characters. I totally forgot who Philip was.
Yeah, you blanked when I asked. I was like, oh, honestly, I only knew because I took note of that moment. If you asked me who Philip was, I would have been like,
who?
the vampire? I don't.
This sounds like there's a lot of characters in this show, and they're all not getting treated that well. Is that what it sounds like so far?
Yeah, we haven't gotten development for a lot of them,
Yeah,
but I'm waiting
come.
for more episodes to come out for each of them. That'll probably be disappointing, but we'll see.
Well, on that note, let's get into, I think this might be the last one. Yes, My Hero Academia. Yeah, it was a pretty good episode this week. So it's finally getting back to the action after some time off for, speaking of which, character development. And so the big thing this week is that they're all getting into the provisional licensing exam. And so there's 1,540 students that are all from all across the country. There's apparently 3 different locations. I think maybe it's over 1,500 per location. I don't know. They didn't really explain that part of it. But they're all entering here, and they're all like first years, but also second years, and maybe even third years that are way more trained than anyone at the school that Deku is going to. And so the big thing here was that, despite the fact that there's over 1,500 people entering into this, only 100 will pass. Well, like Suyu said, it's less than 1%. I think she meant 10%. So her math was kind of off when I read that. I was like, no, it's not. 1% would be like 15 people. Suyu. That's not the right.
So you dropped the show, right?
I know I did. I don't know if that was like a typo, like maybe the person who was translating it on Crunchyroll messed that up. But if she said 1%, I lost a little bit of respect. But that's just that's fine. That's just her character. I don't know. But yeah, it's of course that the big thing they have is that I'm sorry, I'm blanking. What's the name of the school again?
UA
Yeah, UA. What's the actual name?
of the school.
Yeah, what does UA stand for?
Uh, I didn't know that it stood for something. I
It
thought.
Oh, I thought that was an extended name. Okay, so yeah, UA. The big problem that they have to face, the reveal about this episode was that they all held that tournament during the what was it the second season, and so they everyone knows what their powers are, but the students at UA don't know what of course all these other schools what their powers are, so they are at a huge disadvantage, and they have to work around that as they try to pass this big event here that was supposed to use people's agility to sort of prove how capable they are out in the field. So this episode was hilarious. This guy that I got the picture up, he was pretty great too. He reminds me of Ida a little bit, and then he's like, "I'm so sorry," and just smashes his head on the ground because he had a misunderstanding where he kind of pulled himself into like this big cheering section, even if he didn't know anybody. So I thought that was great. We're getting more characters, and I think that I'll be okay with that because some of the people they've introduced so far are also hilarious. I think that's the best thing about the show so far is that you may have a ton of different characters, but they're all uniquely made and they're all different in their powers, not just their powers but their personalities, and it makes them all memorable in some form. And I think that this show's been able to balance that very well. What's your opinion on that, new show?
Uh, on the episode.
Yeah.
I really liked it. I've never been disappointed by an episode of My Hero. I will say the opening for this season or this second part of the season is really, really good. I like it more than the last one. There's a bit in the beginning where you see All Might push Midoriya, like urging him forward, but it's like with his muscle form arm, and then as he's running, you see he reverts back to his like his skinny skeletal form, and I thought that was a really powerful moment. Like with the last bit of
Yeah.
his ability before he retires, he like pushes on the other generation forward, and I thought that was really cool.
It's a
Um,
nice touch.
yeah, as far as the episode goes, I always love when they introduce new characters because Horikoshi has such a great way of creating unique designs and personalities and stuff like that. Something I always like because as the show goes on, you kind of learn more and more just how pivotal that whole arc with Stain, the hero killer,
Yeah.
was. Like you still see the influence that character had over moments like this in the series. Like half of the class was supposed to pass, but since Stain raised hell, the requirements for becoming a hero have become much, much more strict, and so only like 10% are going to pass now. And
Yeah.
so it's really interesting seeing how old arcs and old villains aren't just being forgotten. Their influences are still episodes and episodes later, like impacting how the world develops in this series. And I always really appreciated that about the series.
Yeah, it's they even talked about it that whether you're in it for compensation, which Stain was very much against, or you're in it for the
Hmm.
glory, it's up to you. But clearly that upset a lot of people, and it also I'm sure a lot of the people that we don't see, the people that may have been pulled out because the parents were too afraid to have that happen to their kids, anything like another confrontation like that. So it's as you said, it's having a big impact on the whole superhero populace, and so I'm
Yeah.
see what's going to happen there. What do you think about this episode, Deanna?
Yeah, the scope of the show just got a lot bigger. I'm
Yes.
excited to see the other schools' students' quirks, and also the differences in how like they were taught or trained, and how those students compare to UA's students. We also got a pretty major moment with Uraraka, who realized her feelings for Deku,
That's right. Yes.
but I'm still confused, I guess, if it's just admiration of wanting to be a hero like Deku, or does she really actually like him?
I mean, she even says it herself. She doesn't know what these feelings are. It could be just
Yeah.
admiration, or it could be something romantic. That's the kind of thing that when they first addressed it a number of episodes ago, when she was caught up in that issue where she's being sucked in by the black hole superhero. She didn't understand at that time, and she continues to have these, that she's coming to grips with what exactly those feelings are. That's the kind of thing that happens. I mean, that happened like in Cardcaptor Sakura. It's like, am I romantically tied to this person, or is it something else? And so I'm curious to see what happens there.
Yeah, they even had that moment with Toga where she's explaining like she thinks that her and Araraka are one and the same. Like, don't you love it when you like someone so much that you slowly just want to start becoming them? And you see how that just kind of like chills her down to her core, because she doesn't really know if this is like romantic feelings or if this is just her wanting to become a hero like Deku. And so I think that's a really cool moment, because this is the main issue that she's grappling with for the past few episodes now.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing how that develops. And yeah, the episode is getting, once again, it's getting back to the action parts. So after a bit of a lull, trying to, relax after all the events that happened around what happened to All Might, we're getting back to the action, and I think that's going to be really nice to see where this goes. So yeah, there's that. So from that, we can actually now move into Trigun. So yeah, these we're really getting into it now. So episode 5 and 6 of Trigun. Once again, people out there who aren't paying attention, this is a show that we chose as something we're going to be watching week by week, a couple episodes at a time. So people out there who want to participate with us, watching the show for the first time ever, you can hang on and talk with us about it. So yeah, we're getting into the dramatic parts. It didn't take that long, all things considered. So the big thing about these couple episodes was that Vash shows up in a town where they're in hard times, in dire straits, because the local plant that was giving them all their revenue has shut down. And so at this point, the entire town, after locating him, decided to go after Vash. And so that was episode 5, is just, how he is being targeted. And then, what was it, like the Nebraska group? I think that's what they're called, which is just like this tiny little old guy inside this I've never seen somebody this gigantic, this huge ass dude who stands maybe like 5-6 stories tall, just walks his way through town like this gigantic, like a grappling hook for an arm that he shoots out and can pull right back in. It was like, it's definitely the most over the top the series has been, but it also pulls it into, once again, the history of Vash as a character. And so once he takes out the Nebraska group, it's not much of a spoiler because that was going to happen anyway. There was apparently a bounty on them, also because they broke free from jail. So he gets the town, and he gives all the cash that came from the bounty to the town, which gives them enough money to cover the plant being repaired. And so there's this woman that shows up who turns out to be this company's chief engineer who's supposed to be helping to rebuild the plant. And it gets into the history of Vash and what happens to him. And it's like the heavy stuff. The stuff that people have been talking about the show, that, it was really fun and enjoyable, like the first number of episodes here. But in a sense, kind of like, once again, like Cowboy Bebop, it's that at a certain point, it crosses that threshold into, okay, this is actually something serious. Everyone's got their serious voices on. We got to talk about this. And apparently this woman is out for revenge based on what happened to her as a child. And I don't know about you guys, but like already, before I was hooked to the show, but now that it's getting into this stuff, it's like I'm really looking forward to seeing how the show develops.
Yeah, I'm curious as to what was the cause of his amnesia, and then how he's like immortal, I guess. Because if that was him when the lady was younger, like, how is he still the same?
Oh no, it's anime too. It could be potentially just anime. Like 15 years later, they're all the same. But yeah. What about you, Nusha?
Yeah, these episodes, like, we're definitely, it's a very slow drip, but we're getting more and more details about what we want to know as the audience, is what happened in the past, why this man has this crazy high bounty on him. And another question I personally really want answered, I'm sure you guys do too, is who owns the second gun? I think they said it was like a replica of his gun, and who owns that one? Also, is there a third gun? Because the show is called Trigun, so maybe there's another character out there.
Didn't make the connection until you just said that.
Mine goes.
You never know. Like, there's so much more to learn, and I like that. I kind of like that we haven't gotten one episode with a bunch of backstory and exposition. Like, we're just seeing him trek through these towns, and slowly we're getting more and more revealed. It's kind of like have you guys ever watched, what's that series, Casher and Sins or something like that?
Yes, yes, I did see
Yeah,
that.
it's kind of like that. Like, the character has amnesia, and as he's walking through this like post-apocalyptic world, he's remembering what he had done. And like, it wasn't like one episode where we got all this exposition. It was like we're learning with the character what he did in the past, and I really like that. It puts me in the shoes of the main character, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's like, is Vash really responsible for causing millions of people to go homeless from what he did? And if that's the
Hmm.
case, then it turns the entire character on his head. It's like this happy-go-lucky person is actually a horrible person, and I wonder.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's not the case, because that's not usually how these shows go. It's that it could have been the other person holding the other gun was responsible, but they blame Vash anyway, and that's why he's got the bounty on his head. But clearly he's like of a different class, because he was taking out all these different people. Like, he's cornered with everyone's got guns drawn on him, but he managed to get out of these predicaments no matter what. And then, like, he apparently has like superpowers or something, because he's in the plant that's about to overload, and he manages to he
Yeah.
does this thing, like he just lifts his arm up, and then he, like, everything settles down around him, and so like it doesn't blow up and takes up the town. But and I just, like, there's definitely going to be more people from his history that are going to approach him about the stuff that he's done. But if he's responsible for blowing up an entire town, then it makes him a bit of a tragic character. So I'm very interested to see where that goes.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So
I'm glad we picked this one for our first book club series.
I know I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of that. And it's actually kind of funny, because we were thinking about before watching a Neon Genesis Evangelion, and they just announced that Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0, which is the third movie, that'll be out in 2020. So that might be our next show. So it's like we're gonna get along this stream of like these, not so much apocalyptic, but it's everything is in a very dire situation, and people are constantly being threatened by these outside threats. And so we might keep this train rolling for some more serious moments going forward. But Trigun so far has been great. What's your opinion on it so far, Deanna?
Yeah, it's just like you guys said, we're getting um snippets of Vash's backstory. It's not really just like one episode where it's like info dumping. Um and also, I don't know if you guys noticed, but he wears his glasses like only a couple times. And I feel like there's significance to like when he wears his glasses. Like,
Hmm.
I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like there's a reason why he like only wears it a couple times.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting point, actually. I'm probably gonna start keeping track of when he puts them on now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Uh,
then also, I guess there's a guy who Vash has to meet, and that's the reason why he can't die yet.
Mhm.
So
I
maybe
think
that
we're
guy.
just I think we're just left to assume that's the guy with the other gun,
Yeah.
but we never know. It could be someone else.
yeah,
Hmm.
and the voice acting's just been top notch so far. Like, obviously Vash has got like this really like laid back, crazy voice, but then when he gets to the very serious moments, I'm kind of glad I'm not listening to the English dub, because Johnny on Bosch I can never really take seriously, even as a fan of Eureka 7. Like, his voice just kind of takes me out of it.
Yeah.
But the Japanese voice acting so far has just been insanely good. So I'm especially the insurance girls. That's also kind of selling it too. So, looking forward to checking that out. But yeah, next time we'll be watching episode 7 and 8 as we roll on with Trigun. And of course, we'll provide updates to the other shows that we've been watching. So, yeah, on that note, we'll wrap things up here for this episode of Anime Review. Once again, thank you, Deanna and Nusha, for being a part of this podcast. Everyone out there, thank you for listening. And we'll be back next week, hopefully, with yet another edition of Anime Review. Bye, everyone.
Later.
Bye.